The complex story of the Bioshock multiverse can be boiled down to two things: constants and variables. Each universe home to their own mysteries, tragedy, and parasites, all made up by the slightest variables that have made them different from one another. In two of these universes, a person was born to each, variants of one another, and their journey would lead them to make great changes to their surroundings and eventually the whole multiverse as a result of their initial plan to merely understand the universe around them. Who were these people? What was their ultimate goal? And where are they now? Here we explore in the lore and story behind the Lutece Twins. Way back in the 1800s, a child was born to British ancestry, which would change the multiverse forever. In one universe, this child was born a boy, in which his parents named him Robert, and in an alternate reality, the child was born a girl, Rosalind. As the Lutece children grew, each one developed a strong passion for science and a thirst to understand how the universe worked around them. As a young girl, Rosalind had a dream in which she stood in a room looking at a girl that was not her, but also was. Although her mother had simply regarded this as a nightmare, Rosalind's imagination instead would begin to think of alternate realities and if they could actually exist. From here, she decided that she wanted to study science, and with this, she grew up to start a career in quantum physics. Unknown to her, Robert had also come to the same realization and had decided to enter the same field of study, each one unaware of the other, living extremely similar lives as they began their academic studies and worked on theories. Over the years, their research in quantum physics led them to experiment with atoms, where they learned how they worked and functioned. Parallel to one another, through hard work, they invented a way to indefinitely suspend an atom mid-air, a feat that gained them praise from their peers for such a groundbreaking discovery. In Rosalind's universe, her colleagues named this quantum levitation, while she herself dubbed this the Lutece field. A remarkable discovery by a remarkable person. The ability to manipulate an atom in this way would not only make great waves in the scientific community, but it would also change the multiverse forever. Rosalind wanted to push her research even further. If she could levitate an atom, maybe the Lutece field could levitate a building or even a city. But this would cost much more money than she had to research and develop. On one moment during their research, both Rosalind and Robert used their own Lutece fields to study a pair of quantum entangled atoms. But upon observing these, they made a much greater discovery: each other. It made sense that they would have made the same choices up until this point. With similar minds, they began to communicate through Morse code by manipulating these atoms by turning their Lutece field on and off. This Lutece field had allowed them to break through space and time into new universes. Over time, they learned about each other and their universes. As great as it was to learn of their counterpart, this also confirmed a theory that they had had since they were children, that alternate realities did exist. The next step: visiting them. Although this research was expensive, Rosalind was lucky enough to be approached by a wealthy prophet that had a vision of a floating city in the sky, a place where he could preach his American and Christian ideals, Zachary Hale Comstock. Having heard word of her research with the Lutece field, he believed that she could help make his vision a reality. Up until this point, Rosalind and Robert's paths had steered in the same direction, but Comstock's counterpart did not come to visit Robert in his universe. Working together with Comstock throughout 1882, the city began construction as Rosalind continued to communicate with Robert. With Comstock's funding, she could continue her work with him and search for a way to access Robert's reality, where she could meet him properly. By 1893, the city was developed enough to be shown to the world, where Father Zachary Hale Comstock announced the floating city of Columbia at the 1893 Chicago World Fair. Rosalind had come so far since her original dream of unlocking the secrets of the universe, and now she became known as the person who had essentially invented the floating city. As they had been working closely together, Rosalind entrusted her knowledge of another reality where she had been born a male to Comstock, and that she had found a way to communicate with her counterpart. Deemed the prophet of Columbia by his followers, Comstock saw the potential of this research if Rosalind were to develop it further, and so he gave her every resource she needed to create a device that would allow them to peer into other realities. Taking advantage of this rare opportunity, Rosalind managed to create the Lutece device, a powerful machine capable of opening up tears into any reality that the user could imagine from her lab and home, Lutece Labs, in the Market District of downtown Emporia of Columbia. Now, Rosalind could finally meet Robert in person. With the machine at his full disposal, Comstock was able to see into other realities and the future. With this information, he passed it on to his following in his city, where he solidified his status as prophet. His followers did not know where he received this information, but they truly believed he had divine capabilities. Unfortunately, Comstock's continued use of the Lutece device resulted in adverse effects. The device harmed him in return for this knowledge, where he aged and became sterile. Although Rosalind had broken many scientific boundaries, which could change humanity for the better, as well as an increased understanding of the multiverse and the various realities within it, it would only be a matter of time before the misuse of this machine would ultimately bring chaos. Standing at the Lutece device, Comstock looked at what the future had in store for Columbia. He was shocked to find that if he did not have an heir to succeed him, then the city would fall. This worried him greatly as he and his wife had been trying for a child, but the use of the machine had rendered him sterile, so he reached out to Robert and Rosalind for a solution to this problem. Rosalind suggested that just because he could not conceive a child in this reality, it did not mean he had not already had a child in another. Following this, they believed that if they took a child from another universe, then it would technically still count as his heir, as the child would still biologically be his. Agreeing to this, Comstock asked Rosalind to find a reality where he could take a child, and to their luck, they discovered just what they were looking for. In Robert's reality, during his research of the Lutece device, Zachary Hale Comstock had not approached him with funding like Rosalind had. This was because his version of Comstock had lived a very different life. His Comstock went by the name of Booker DeWitt. After his part in the Wounded Knee massacre, he felt guilt for the atrocious acts he had committed, but buried himself in work as a private investigator, while his counterpart in Rosalind's universe had fallen into religion and taken on the name Zachary Hale Comstock. This one choice had changed the course of their lives. Booker then fell in love and married, but as his wife Anna gave birth to their daughter, she passed away, leaving him to fall deep into a depression where he racked up large debts to gambling. On October 8, 1893, Comstock decided to take advantage of Booker's dire circumstances, where he tasked Robert with meeting DeWitt and offered to wipe away his gambling debts in return for the child, who he had named Anna. As a desperate man, DeWitt accepted this deal and handed her over. With the child, Robert took her to a meeting spot where he, Comstock, and Anna planned to pass back through into Columbia to begin their new lives there. As they prepared to pass through, Rosalind pushed Robert to travel through the tear into her universe, but with the window appearing to be unstable, he was extremely hesitant. To make this moment even more stressful, Booker had changed his mind and tracked down Robert, where he demanded his daughter back. In this stressful situation, Booker attempted to grab Anna from his counterpart as the tear between realities stabilized. Unfortunately for Booker, Robert and Comstock managed to jump through the tear with Anna just before it closed, But in Anna's case, the closing of the tear severed her pinky finger in the process, leaving a part of her in both universes. All Booker had left of his daughter was the tip of her pinky finger, which would leave him to spiral once again. As a new resident of Columbia, Robert officially joined his sister and Comstock in the Lutece labs. On one day, Comstock's wife, Lady Annabelle Comstock, confronted Rosalind on the origin of the child her husband had brought home. She believed that Rosalind had had an affair with her husband and was its mother. In response to this, Rosalind was able to calm her down and explained just where this child had come from, a tale she struggled to believe. Over the next 2 years, Rosalind and Robert worked together, brother and sister from different realities, to improve Columbia with their new inventions. As they discovered more about the universe and trans-dimensional travel, they wrote books on their experiences and became well known across the city as the brightest minds. Although essentially the same person, Robert sought out the fun in his scientific experiments, while his sister conducted herself in a more strict procedural manner. Although it was going great for the twins, Lady Comstock still struggled with the knowledge of where her daughter had come from, who now went by the name Elizabeth. So she decided that she would tell the whole of Columbia, but before she could, her husband had her murdered to save his reputation and blamed his maid, Daisy Fitzroy, for the crime, adding to the growing rampant racism in the city. As their research grew, so did Elizabeth. To keep his daughter safe from a growing resistance across the city, Comstock decided to house her in a tower on Monument Island. Over the years, he discovered that Elizabeth displayed abilities similar to the Lutece device. She could open tears into other worlds. After taking her to the twins, Rosalind suggested that she may have developed this ability as she technically existed in 2 universes as a result of the severing of her pinky finger during her abduction. At approximately 13 years old in 1907, Elizabeth began puberty, which expanded her powers immensely. Unable to control these abilities, Comstock once again sought out the help of the Lutece twins to help control his daughter. In their research, the Luteces had discovered a way to manipulate this quantum energy that Elizabeth had access to, and with this, they created a giant siphon in Elizabeth's home on Monument Island that essentially drained her powers to a manageable level. In 1909, the twins used their device to look at the future of Columbia, and although they had kidnapped Elizabeth to stop Columbia from falling, they were shocked to discover the other side of this coin. They found that in their future, Comstock would raise the child to wage war with the world below, beginning with the destruction of New York City using the technology they had invented. At this moment, Robert felt remorse for what he had done and how his actions would affect this universe. Although extremely similar, Rosalind did not seem to feel the same way he did. To this, Robert gave Rosalind an ultimatum, that they undo their mistake and return Elizabeth to her own universe free from the clutches of her false father, or he would return alone and leave his sister and Columbia to continue on their disastrous trajectory planned by Father Comstock. Robert understood her more than anyone, and unwilling to lose her brother, she agreed to his ultimatum in order to save their relationship and the world below. And so, they formed a plan to return Elizabeth, but as the more skeptical of the two, Rosalind feared they would not succeed. As the twins planned their next move, Comstock somehow became aware of what they were intending to do, and having worked hard to create his city, have it become its own country, grown a following, and now made sacrifices to have a daughter, which had subsequently led to the death of his wife, Comstock would do anything to protect what he had worked for. The Lutece twins had been instrumental in his rise to power, but he would not allow them to trigger his fall. In response, he asked one of Columbia's rising businessmen and inventors, Jeremiah Fink, to sabotage the Lutece device. In return for this deed, he offered Fink full ownership of the Lutece patent when they were dead, where he could grow his own business with their work. On October 31st, 1909, the Lutece twins started their day as usual and powered on the Lutece device. Upon activation, the device malfunctioned and surged. As the energy hit the twins, it broke them down into atoms, where the device scattered them through an open tear across the entire multiverse. It appeared to Comstock and those in Columbia that the Lutece twins had passed away, when in reality, their very existence occupied multiple realities throughout space and time at once, where they were transformed into a state of quantum superposition, similar to the abilities Elizabeth had, but much more powerful. With this, they gained the ability to traverse reality itself with ease, and could go wherever and whenever they wanted, together. Over the following years, in Columbia, Comstock went on with his plan to have his daughter become the ruler of Columbia and wage war with the world below. Although Rosalind was happy to traverse the multiverse free from the mortal coil with her brother, Robert still felt guilt of having stolen a child and the repercussions of what this could mean for the world below Columbia. So, with her dependency on her brother, Rosalind followed his lead, where they came up with another plan to protect the world they had left behind. Columbia believed them to be dead, and to avoid disrupting the reality they had left behind, they chose someone to act on their behalf to save Elizabeth and the world from Comstock's future plan. For this task, they chose her real father, Booker DeWitt. In 1912, around 20 years after his daughter had been taken, Robert once again travelled to his original universe and this time took Booker to the universe of Columbia. Upon arrival in a boat heading towards the entrance to the floating city, the twins discovered that Booker's mind struggled to pass through to another reality, where it worked hard to piece together any memory he had to make sense of this alternate world. In this moment, the twins took advantage of his confusion, and with prior knowledge of this situation, they told him that he needed to enter Columbia to find a girl and bring her to New York to wipe away his debt. His mind had reclaimed some memories and removed others. To help him, the twins also gave him a pistol, a photograph of Elizabeth, now around 20 years old, and various other trinkets to help him on his path. With access to the Lutece device, Comstock had seen his alternate self enter his city, and he believed he would come for Elizabeth, and to this, he used his position as prophet to alert the city of a false prophet that would attempt to kidnap the Lamb of Columbia. The task of guiding Booker DeWitt was not easy for the Luteces, where he died many times on his mission, but the twins had a power over reality and simply brought a new variant of him to another version of Columbia each time. This allowed the twins to observe his mistakes and misfortune, where they intervened directly on his journey, from having telegrams sent to him with information on how to avoid situations that would lead to his death, to manipulating the people he and Elizabeth would encounter on their fight to leave Columbia, and the grasp of Father Comstock. The twins believed in the theory of constants and variables, and in Booker DeWitt's case, they made sure to make note of the variables. On his way to the Columbia raffle, the twins met Booker every time, where they told him to flip a coin and asked him what he believed the coin would land on, heads or tails. In every reality, the coin would always land on heads regardless. This was a constant, and the variable would be Booker's response on what he believed the coin would land on. Using a scoreboard, in each reality, they kept track of Booker's attempts and what the coin had landed on. With the belief of constants and variables, it seemed that many things in each of these realities were set in stone, such as the coin landing on heads, and could not be changed, but they could at least adjust the variables, such as Booker and the path he followed, where the twins attempted to steer him clear of danger to keep him alive. Although the situation was serious, Robert found humour in betting against his sister, in which he normally won. On Booker's 122nd attempt of saving Elizabeth, and having learned about the variables they could manipulate on Booker's journey, the Lutece twins' indirect intervention and advice finally worked, where he managed to enter Monument Island, saved the girl from her guardian, Songbird, and destroyed the Siphon, which led to her understanding and unlocking her full potential and abilities. Free from her father's grasp, Columbia fell, and then Elizabeth disappeared with Booker on the next stage of her journey. The Lutece twins had succeeded in rectifying their mistake from 20 years before, bringing father and daughter back together, and now they could move on with their own story. Following Elizabeth's understanding of what had happened to her and her newfound ability to traverse the multiverse itself, it seemed that the Lutece twins had finally completed what they had set out to do after their transformation. Free from guilt, the twins now had the opportunity to move on and traverse the multiverse together, without conflict, but they would still get involved in events from time to time. Still angry with Comstock and every Comstock that had existed, Elizabeth set herself a mission to remove every Comstock from existence, which led her to Rapture, a city under the sea. In this reality, these Luteces had sent a variant of Comstock to Rapture to hide from a terrible mistake he had made and regretted. Watching from a distance, the Lutece twins observed Elizabeth on her path of vengeance. It seemed they had a connection to the girl, considering everything they had been through, and followed her from a distance to keep an eye on her. Unfortunately, Elizabeth was killed after watching the final Comstock fall to a Big Daddy's drill, which then turned on her. Elizabeth's death ejected her from that universe, but she still had unfinished business there. In a place between worlds, Elizabeth turned to the Lutece twins for a way to return to Rapture, but returning to a universe where she had already died would have major, unforeseen consequences. Following their research and understanding of the multiverse, the twins theorized that as Elizabeth had already died in a universe she was attempting to re-enter, then upon arrival, she would be stripped of her quantum superposition and essentially become mortal and powerless. Against their wishes, the twins watched as Elizabeth re-entered Rapture as they sailed off into another reality. Elizabeth's sacrifice and need to return to Rapture confirmed to the Luteces that they could in fact actually return to the exact universe they had been murdered in at the moment they had died, but this would also come at the cost of their abilities. With a power so great, they decided to stay as they were, traversing the multiverse together as siblings. Bioshock is full of many interesting locations, characters, and ideas. I know that Bioshock Infinite is a pretty divisive installment in the series. Some hate it and some love it. Personally, I love it. It's my favourite in the series. I see the common problem people have with the game is that it is too complicated or it doesn't make sense. Personally, it makes sense to me, but I have done the research and created a timeline to understand it and put all the events in the correct order, which begs the question, should a game require research to understand it? Anyway, back on point. The Lutece twins are very well written characters once you understand their journey and motivations, and I really enjoyed putting this episode together. It improved my understanding of the characters, and I hope it improved yours too. I like that they're called twins too. They are the same person, just with the opposite gender and slight situations that have adjusted their personality. So, as much as they're not twins or siblings, I guess they also are. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like and a comment on your thoughts to boost that algorithm. It would help a lot. I would also like to thank my patrons and channel members who are on the screen right now, and an extra special thank you to my gold tier patrons and channel members, Jonas, Lewis, Queen Arby, Fluffy the Dragon, and Mr. M791. What did you think of this lore? Did you find the Lutece twins interesting? And would you like the twins to at least pop up in the next Bioshock game? Let me know in the comments below. Now, Multiversal Traveler, enjoy your day. Bye.